Welcome back to my channel, everyone. Today, we're going to dive into an important topic: how to stop being too available and why it matters. It's something that affects so many of us in our relationships, whether it's with family, friends, or romantic partners. Being constantly available can have a huge impact on how others value us, and more importantly, how we value ourselves. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me about your own relationship struggles. I'd love to help you work through them and give you advice on how to handle those tricky situations. Now, let's get started. When we think about relationships, we often picture this constant flow of communication. The texts, the calls, the moments when we're always there for each other. And while it might feel good in the short term, always being available, always on call, can have a significant and often unspoken impact on the dynamics of a relationship. We live in a world where instant gratification is the norm. Thanks to technology, we're always a message away from someone. It's easy to fall into the trap of being constantly available, responding to texts and calls within seconds, ready to meet up at the drop of a hat. But let me ask you this: have you ever stopped to think about the effect this has on your relationships? Have you noticed how, over time, it can create a sense of imbalance? When we're too available, it often shifts the power dynamic in a relationship. It places all the control in the hands of the other person. They know that at any moment you'll drop what you're doing, that you'll always respond right away, that you're just waiting to be needed. Now, while this might sound like you're being a good friend, partner, or family member, in reality, it can breed dependency, and not in a healthy way. The more we show up instantly, the less people have to invest in us. They start to take our availability for granted, and before you know it, you're no longer a priority in their life. You're simply a convenience. Being too available creates this invisible imbalance, where one side starts putting in less effort because they know you'll always be there, no questions asked. The excitement of a relationship can fade away when there's no challenge, no mystery, no effort required to keep things alive. Imagine a partner or friend who is always ready, always accessible. Where's the thrill? Where's the incentive to make the relationship feel special? You see, the things that make relationships meaningful are often the things we work for. The anticipation, the moments when we aren't sure if someone is available or if they're just as busy as we are. On the flip side, when you're constantly at someone's beck and call, you also lose a part of yourself in the process. You stop focusing on your own needs, desires, and well-being. You become so wrapped up in trying to be there for everyone else that you forget to be there for yourself. You stop nurturing your own life, and over time, you may even lose a sense of who you are outside of your relationship with others. Think about it. When was the last time you spent a weekend doing absolutely nothing because you were too busy jumping from one request to the next? When was the last time you said no to something you didn't want to do simply because you didn't feel like it? And that was okay. Constantly making yourself available chips away at your own time and space. And that's something a lot of people don't consider. It's easy to think you're being kind, generous, or a good friend, but in reality, you're sacrificing your own needs and boundaries. And over time, that's exhausting. If you're always giving, constantly putting others first, and never taking time to replenish your own energy, eventually there's nothing left to give. You might be wondering, what's the big deal with being available? Doesn't it show I care? Of course, showing you care is essential, but it's not about availability. It's about quality. It's about how you show up when you do show up. Being too available makes your presence feel less valuable because it's no longer scarce now. And when something is too easy to get, it loses its appeal. Let's think about it in terms of value. If someone knows you're always going to be there, always going to pick up the phone, always going to say yes to whatever they ask, how much do they value you? Sure, they appreciate your presence, but do they respect the effort it takes for you to show up in the way you do? Or have they come to expect it, taking you and your time for granted? When you pull back and stop being so available, you increase your perceived value. It's simple human nature. People want what they can't have. When they have to wait for your response, when they have to think about whether or not they'll get a yes from you, they start to appreciate you more. And this isn't about playing games. This is about creating healthy boundaries. It's about showing up when you genuinely want to and giving the best of yourself, not when you're just filling a gap because you're worried about missing out on something. Another critical aspect of overavailability is how it can cause unhealthy dependency. It creates an environment where the other person never learns to function independently, and eventually they begin to rely on you for everything. This isn't healthy, not for them and certainly not for you. A healthy relationship is one where both individuals bring their whole selves to the table, where there's a sense of autonomy and mutual respect. But when you're always available, you inadvertently take on the role of the caregiver or the crutch. The other person leans on you, not because they need to, but because they've gotten used to you always being there. Over time, this dynamic becomes more and more one-sided. So what's the solution? It's about finding a balance, a healthy middle ground between being present for others and taking care of yourself. It's about remembering that your time and energy are just as important as anyone else's. Yes, be there for people when it counts, but also know when to say no, when to step back, and when to put yourself first. Because here's the truth. If you want to be truly available to the people who matter most, you have to first be available to yourself. Setting boundaries can feel like one of the hardest things to do, especially when we care about the people in our lives. But here's the thing. If you don't set clear boundaries, you're going to end up giving so much of yourself away that there's nothing left for you. We all have a limited amount of time and energy, and if we're constantly bending our limits to accommodate others, we risk burning out and losing sight of who we are and what we need. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you said yes to something, even though deep down, you really didn't want to? How many times have you agreed to something because you didn't want to let someone down or feel guilty for not helping? I'll be the first to admit, it's not easy to say no. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're letting someone down. But the reality is, saying no isn't just about rejecting a request. It's about preserving your own well-being and maintaining balance in your life. Setting healthy boundaries isn't just about saying no when you need to. It's about being proactive in defining your limits and protecting your time. The people around you need to understand that you have your own needs, your own life to live, and that's okay. It's not selfish, it's self-care. It's about respecting yourself enough to draw lines that allow you to recharge, focus on your own goals, and show up as the best version of yourself when you do give to others. One of the most important things to remember when it comes to boundaries is that you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. Often, we feel like we need to justify our decisions, explain why we can't do something, or offer excuses. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone an explanation for prioritizing yourself. It's okay to say, I can't do this right now, and leave it at that. You don't need to justify your time or energy to anyone. And you certainly don't need to feel guilty for putting yourself first. The people who truly respect you will understand. And those who don't might just need to learn to respect your boundaries. But how do we actually do this? How do we set boundaries without feeling like we're being mean or unkind? It starts with getting comfortable with the idea that your time is valuable. The first step in setting boundaries is realizing that you have a right to protect your time, your energy, and your peace of mind. Once you believe this, it becomes easier to communicate your limits. It's important to recognize that your time is just as precious as anyone else's. So when someone asks for your time or attention, don't feel like you need to give it away without considering whether it aligns with your priorities. Now, let's talk about how to actually say no. One of the best ways to do this is by being direct and clear, but also kind. You don't need to be harsh or dismissive, you just need to communicate that you can't do something. For example, if someone asks you for a favor and you're not able to help, you can say something like, I wish I could help, but I'm not available right now. Or I'm focusing on something else at the moment, so I'm going to have to pass on this one. There's no need to offer a lengthy excuse or make yourself feel bad for not being available. By keeping your response simple and straightforward, you give yourself the permission to say no without the guilt that often follows. Another important part of setting boundaries is recognizing when to say no even when you want to say yes. Sometimes we say yes out of a desire to please others or avoid conflict. But when you say yes to something that doesn't truly serve you, you're not doing yourself or the other person any favors. Over time, this can lead to resentment, burnout, and a loss of personal fulfillment. By saying no when necessary, you're not only protecting your own time and energy, but also ensuring that when you do say yes, it's meaningful and comes from a place of genuine desire to help or connect. Setting boundaries also means creating time for yourself, even if that time doesn't fit into the expectations of others. We often feel pressured to be available whenever someone needs us, but the truth is, we all need time to recharge. Whether that's taking a quiet evening for yourself, spending time with your own thoughts, or focusing on a personal project, it's essential to carve out space for your own needs. This doesn't mean you're shutting people out. It simply means you're making sure you have the energy to show up for them in a meaningful way when the time is right. In some cases, you might find that people don't immediately respect your boundaries. This can be challenging, especially if you're dealing with someone who is used to you being available all the time. But here's the thing, boundaries are not something you negotiate. They're something you establish for your own well-being, and it's important to stand firm in that. If someone doesn't respect your boundaries, it's a reflection of their lack of understanding, not a reflection of your worth. And over time, the more you practice setting boundaries, the more others will learn to respect them. The key to setting boundaries is consistency. The more consistently you communicate your limits, the more others will come to expect them and understand them. It's not something that happens overnight, but over time, setting clear boundaries will become second nature. And the result? You'll start to feel more in control of your time, your energy, and your life. You'll feel more empowered to say no when necessary and say yes when it's truly right for you. And ultimately, you'll create space for the things and people that really matter, while protecting your own peace and personal growth. At the end of the day, boundaries aren't just about saying no, they're about honoring yourself, protecting your time, and creating a life that's balanced and fulfilling. When we talk about relationships, it's easy to get caught up in the idea that showing up for others means always being there for them, no matter what. We often convince ourselves that being constantly available is the way to prove we care, that it's how we show love and support. But here's the catch: when you're so focused on being available to everyone else, you risk neglecting the most important person in your life, yourself. The truth is, being too available, constantly dropping everything to meet the needs of others, often stems from putting your own needs on the back burner. You might feel like you're doing the right thing by always saying yes, by always being there for a friend or a partner when they need you, but over time, this can take a serious toll on your emotional and mental well-being. It's easy to forget that relationships work best when both people are bringing their best selves to the table, but if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't possibly bring your best self to any relationship. Think about it this way: if you're running on empty, you can't be there for others in a way that's meaningful. You might show up physically, but emotionally, mentally, you're drained. And eventually that takes a toll. You might start resenting the very people you've been trying to help. You might feel like you've given so much of yourself that there's nothing left. And yet, when you feel drained, it's easy to keep pushing yourself, thinking that somehow, if you just keep going, it will all work out. But here's what really happens when you neglect your own needs. You end up feeling burned out, disconnected from your own emotions, and, over time, resentful of the very people you've been trying to please. The key here is understanding that self-care is not selfish, it's necessary. It's impossible to be truly present for anyone if you're not first present for yourself. It's easy to feel guilty about taking time for yourself, especially when you've been conditioned to always put others first. But let me tell you this, if you don't make time for yourself, you won't be able to maintain healthy, fulfilling connections with anyone. When you prioritize your own well-being, you're actually showing up for others in a more meaningful way because you have the energy, the patience, and the emotional bandwidth to be there for them. Nurturing your own well-being is about recognizing that you too have needs that matter. You deserve to feel fulfilled, recharged, and at peace. This means making time for things that restore you, whether that's pursuing a hobby, taking a walk, getting lost in a book, or just sitting in silence to reflect. It's easy to think that your value is tied to how much you do for others, but that's a dangerous mindset. You don't need to prove your worth by being endlessly available. Your worth is intrinsic. And when you take the time to nurture yourself, you begin to realize that it's okay to be unavailable sometimes. In fact, it's healthy. Think about it. When was the last time you actually spent time just for you? I'm not talking about time spent doing something for someone else or multitasking. I'm talking about genuine self-care time where you're only focusing on your own needs without guilt, without distractions. If you can't remember, that's a sign that you might be neglecting yourself. And that's where the issue starts. When you're too caught up in fulfilling everyone else's needs, you forget that your own needs are just as important. A big part of recognizing your own needs is learning how to say no, not just to others, but to yourself as well. Sometimes we push ourselves beyond our limits because we think we should. We think we have to keep going, keep doing, keep being available, because that's what's expected of us. But the reality is that if you're constantly saying yes to everything, you're inevitably saying no to your own well-being. You're saying no to rest, to relaxation, to peace of mind. And over time, that starts to add up, and it can lead to feelings of frustration, burnout, and even resentment. Self-care also means creating boundaries around your time. It's about recognizing that it's okay to prioritize yourself without feeling guilty. And it's not just about saying no to others, it's about saying yes to yourself. When you make time for the things that recharge you, you are filling up your own emotional tank, which in turn allows you to show up in a more meaningful way for others. Whether it's saying no to an invitation when you're tired or taking a quiet moment for yourself instead of running errands for someone else. These little acts of self-care are what make a huge difference in your long-term well-being. The other thing to keep in mind is that prioritizing self-care doesn't mean abandoning your relationships. It simply means that you're making sure you're at your best so that you can show up for the people who matter most. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to give the kind of support, love, and attention that you want to. So when you recognize your own needs, you're not just improving your own life, you're improving the quality of the relationships around you. We all have different needs, different ways we recharge, and different ways we find peace. For some people, it's through physical activities like exercise or yoga. For others, it's through creative pursuits, reading, or spending quiet time alone. The key is figuring out what works for you and making sure that you make time for it regularly. Because when you start to nurture yourself, you start to realize that taking care of yourself isn't just an act of self-love, it's an act of love for everyone around you. When you begin to recognize and prioritize your own needs, you create a life that's more balanced, more fulfilled, and more meaningful. It's not about being unavailable all the time. It's about knowing when to step back, recharge, and take care of yourself so that you can give the best of yourself to others. You are worth it, and your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. And when you finally start putting yourself first, you'll find that everything else falls into place. We all know that relationships require effort and connection, but there's one thing many of us overlook: the power of mystery. It sounds counterintuitive, right? After all, we're taught to be transparent, to share everything, to let others know exactly where we stand, what we're doing, and how we're feeling at all times. But here's the truth: being too available can actually work against you. It can make you seem too predictable, too easy to figure out, and ultimately, that can take away the excitement and intrigue that keeps a relationship fresh. So, let's talk about how being a little less available can actually make you more intriguing and spark curiosity in others. When you're always available, whether it's for a text, a phone call, or a quick meetup, you may think you're showing someone you care. But what you're really doing is making yourself too accessible. And here's the thing: when something is too easily accessible, it loses value. People naturally value things that are hard to get or that require effort to acquire. It's human nature. The more easily we get something, the less we appreciate it. This is especially true in relationships. If someone knows that you're always going to be there, no matter the hour or the day, they begin to take that for granted. They know exactly what to expect from you, and over time, that predictability can lead to complacency. Now, imagine if you pull back a little bit. Imagine if you didn't immediately respond to every text, didn't immediately drop everything when someone called. Suddenly, you become a bit more elusive, a little harder to read, and that opens the door to curiosity. People want to know what you're doing, where you are, and what you're thinking. It sparks intrigue, and it forces them to consider you more deeply. It's not about playing games or being manipulative. It's about creating a natural space where the relationship can grow and evolve, where there's room for both of you to experience something new and exciting together. In romantic relationships, this sense of mystery can make the difference between a relationship that burns out quickly and one that endures over time. Think about it. When you first meet someone, there's this phase of discovery. You're getting to know each other, learning about each other's likes, dislikes, habits, and quirks. There's excitement in the unknown, in the space where you haven't figured everything out yet. But as time goes on, if you're constantly available, that space begins to shrink. You know each other too well, and the mystery starts to fade. When you cultivate a sense of intrigue, when you're not always immediately available, you're keeping that space open for discovery. You're giving the relationship room to breathe and evolve. This doesn't mean you should shut people out, ignore them, or play hard to get in a way that feels manipulative or dismissive. It's about balancing your own life and interests with the relationship. When you maintain your own sense of individuality and keep some things to yourself, you create a sense of mystery that makes the other person want to get to know you even more. They start to feel that there's always something to discover, something more to learn, and that curiosity keeps them engaged. It's not just in romantic relationships that mystery plays a role. In friendships, too, cultivating a bit of mystery can help keep the bond fresh and exciting. If you're always available for every hangout, every conversation, every plan, your friends might start to take your presence for granted. But when you're a little less predictable, when you don't immediately respond to every text or agree to every invitation, it makes your presence feel more special. People will start to appreciate the time they spend with you more, because they know it's not guaranteed. They know that when you show up, it's because you genuinely want to be there, not because you've got nothing else going on. Being less available also helps maintain respect in relationships. When you're constantly available, people can start to feel entitled to your time and attention. They might begin to assume that you'll always drop everything for them. And over time, that can lead to a lack of appreciation for the effort you put into the relationship. On the other hand, when you maintain a bit of mystery, you show that you value yourself and your time. You set the tone for the relationship by letting others know that while you're there for them, you also have your own life, your own interests, and your own boundaries. This creates a dynamic where both parties respect each other's time and energy, and that respect is what keeps the relationship healthy in the long term. The key to cultivating a sense of mystery is to find the balance between being present and being elusive. It's not about playing games, it's about creating space. By being a little less available, you give the other person the chance to miss you, to think about you when you're not around, and to look forward to the next time you connect. This anticipation builds excitement and keeps things fresh, whether you're in a romantic relationship or a friendship. And here's the thing, mystery isn't just about withholding information or playing hard to get. It's also about being engaged in your own life, having your own interests, and not defining yourself solely by your relationships. The more you invest in yourself, whether it's through hobbies, work, travel, or personal growth, the more intriguing you become. People are naturally drawn to those who have their own lives, their own passions, and their own sense of purpose. It's this richness that makes you more interesting, more attractive, and more worth pursuing. In relationships, mystery doesn't mean shutting down or withdrawing completely. It's about having a sense of autonomy, of maintaining your own identity, and of keeping some things to yourself. It's about allowing others to wonder, to ask questions, and to be curious about who you are. When you keep a bit of distance, when you're not always available, you maintain that element of surprise. And surprise is often the secret ingredient that keeps relationships exciting. Ultimately, the key to maintaining intrigue and respect in any relationship is to remember that being too available can make you less valuable in the eyes of others. When you maintain a bit of mystery, you give others the opportunity to appreciate you more, to respect you more, and to see you in a new light. And in the end, that's what makes relationships truly exciting, whether they're romantic or platonic. You keep things fresh, you keep things meaningful, and most importantly, you keep things real. In a world that's constantly moving, where everyone expects immediate responses and quick turnarounds, it can be hard to resist the urge to always be available. We've all been there, the phone buzzing, the message alert pinging, and before we even think about it, we're reaching for it, ready to often before the thought of whether we should have waited even crosses our mind. But here's the thing, when we react immediately, we lose an essential element in communication: timing. We often think that the key to effective communication is simply responding quickly, always being on call, always being present. But in reality, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a conversation is simply wait. And I'm not talking about waiting as a passive act. I'm talking about understanding the power of timing and how it can elevate every interaction you have. Patience in communication allows for reflection. When we give ourselves a moment before responding, we open up the space for more thoughtful, intentional replies. If we're constantly rushing to be the first to respond, to be the one who speaks the loudest or the fastest, we risk losing the opportunity to really think through what we want to say. Instead of reacting emotionally, we can respond thoughtfully. The pause might feel uncomfortable at first, but over time, you start to realize that waiting just a moment allows you to respond in a way that aligns with your intentions, rather than being driven by impulse or the pressure to fill silence. There's a huge difference between responding quickly because you feel like you have to, and responding because you've taken a moment to process what's been said and decide on the most meaningful way to contribute, that moment of silence. It's not awkward or wasted, it's powerful. And the best part is that it allows you to communicate in a way that creates more impact. When you take the time to think, your response carries more weight because it's intentional, measured, and thoughtful. Patience isn't just about the pauses you create in a conversation. It's about resisting the urge to be constantly available. We've become so accustomed to being always reachable, always on our phones, always responding to messages the moment they come in. We check our emails, respond to texts, and feel this constant pressure to stay connected. But here's the thing, the more we do this, the less valuable our time becomes. People start to expect that we're always going to be there. They expect quick answers, immediate responses, and endless availability. But when you break free from this cycle, when you step back and allow some space between interactions, you actually increase the value of your time and attention. By not immediately replying, by choosing when and how to respond, you begin to reclaim your power in communication. You show that your time is valuable, that your attention is something to be earned, not expected. You also give the person on the other end the opportunity to reflect and give a more thoughtful response themselves. It's a beautiful thing because you're both forced to step out of the rush, take a moment to breathe, and then engage in a way that's more mindful and impactful. This doesn't mean ignoring people or playing hard to get. It's not about being dismissive or distant. It's about creating balance in your relationships and in your communication. When you make it a habit to not rush to respond, you become more deliberate in your interactions. This doesn't just improve how you communicate, it improves how you're perceived. People start to notice that your responses are measured, that your words have weight. You stop being seen as someone who's just filling space with quick replies and start being seen as someone who speaks with purpose, someone who knows when to speak and when to listen. Now, let's talk about the other side of the coin, timing in person-to-person communication. It's not just about texts and emails. Timing also plays a huge role in face-to-face interactions. We've all experienced those moments where we've spoken too quickly or interrupted someone in the middle of what they were saying, and we could immediately feel that the moment was lost. That pause before we respond in person, just taking a second to think, can make a huge difference. It allows the conversation to flow more naturally and gives the other person space to finish their thoughts, which in turn leads to better dialogue. It creates respect between both parties, showing that you value what they have to say, and that you're not just waiting for your turn to speak. In relationships, whether romantic or platonic, patience in timing can be transformative. Think about the early days of a relationship when things are fresh, exciting, and new. There's often a sense of mystery, of anticipation, because you're not constantly available to each other. There's space. And this space, this waiting, makes every interaction feel more meaningful. When someone's not immediately texting or calling you, you find yourself thinking about them more. You wonder what they're doing, where they are, and what they're thinking. You wait for their messages, and when they finally come, it feels exciting, it feels significant. The same principle applies in deeper relationships. As things evolve, the temptation can be to communicate more, to overdo it, to be constantly available. But what happens when you give each other a little room to breathe, a little space to miss each other? Suddenly, every interaction feels more meaningful because it's not about constant communication, it's about timing. The moments you do share are more precious, and the relationship becomes richer because you've allowed the pauses to create anticipation and appreciation. And let's not forget how patience and timing can affect conflict resolution. So often when we're in an argument or a disagreement, our immediate instinct is to respond quickly, to defend ourselves, to say something to win the argument. But in reality, this often makes things worse. The best thing you can do in a heated moment is to step back, take a breath, and let things settle before you respond. It's not about avoiding the conversation, it's about taking the time to process, to think about the other person's perspective, and to choose your words carefully. This is when patience really becomes a superpower. It allows you to approach conflict with clarity and empathy, and it helps prevent saying things you might regret later. Timing and patience in communication are about being strategic in how and when you engage. It's not about being unavailable all the time. It's about knowing when it's right to show up and when it's better to hold back. By practicing patience, by not always responding immediately, you create space for better conversations, more meaningful relationships, and deeper connections. You stop being defined by your availability and start being defined by your intention, your purpose, and your ability to communicate in a way that truly matters. So remember this, sometimes the best response is the one that doesn't come right away. Sometimes silence and patience are the most powerful forms of communication. And when you embrace that, you'll find that your relationships, your conversations, and your life will start to feel more deliberate, more intentional, and ultimately more rewarding. When you're constantly available, whether it's through text messages, phone calls, or dropping everything to help someone, it's easy to think you're doing the right thing. We've all been there, wanting to be the person who's always there for others, who's reliable, who makes themselves available at the drop of a hat. And while there's nothing wrong with being there for people, what happens when you're always accessible? The answer is simple: your value begins to diminish. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be helpful or that you should start ignoring people. What I'm saying is that when you're always available, you unintentionally set yourself up for less respect. Let me explain why. Think about anything in life that's always available to you, whether it's food, entertainment, or even someone's time. The more you have access to something, the less you value it. If you're constantly there for people, they start to expect it. They begin to take your time and your energy for granted. After all, if they know they can call you anytime and you'll be there immediately, they stop seeing the value in it. There's no sense of rarity. It becomes expected. But when you make yourself less available, you increase your value. It's the principle of scarcity at work. Scarcity is a powerful force in how we perceive value. Think about it. When something is rare, we place more important. A limited edition item is far more desirable than something that's mass-produced. The same goes for your time and your presence. When you set boundaries and don't immediately jump to meet everyone's needs, you create a sense of scarcity around yourself. This scarcity makes others appreciate you more. They start to realize that your time is limited, that your attention is valuable, and they treat it accordingly. Now, setting boundaries is key here. It's not about disappearing and cutting people off. It's about establishing clear lines that help you protect your time and energy. And in doing so, you show people how much you value yourself. When you're constantly available, you're sending a message, whether you realize it or not, that your time doesn't matter as much as theirs. But when you create boundaries, you're saying, I matter. My time matters. And I won't let anyone take that for granted. This is a powerful message to send, not just to others, but to yourself as well. By setting boundaries, you teach others how to treat you and show yourself the respect you deserve. It's important to remember that setting boundaries isn't about being selfish. It's about being self-respecting. You're not pulling away from others, you're simply making sure that your needs are met too. In fact, when you set healthy boundaries, you're actually in a better position to show up for others in a meaningful way. If you're always exhausted because you're running around fulfilling everyone else's needs, how can you possibly be your best self for anyone else? By setting limits, you ensure that you have the energy and the mental space to be present when it matters. And that's something people will respect even more. When you start setting boundaries, you'll notice that the people around you actually start to treat you with more respect. They see that you're not just a doormat, that you have your own life, your own priorities. And guess what? They'll respect you more for it. It's counterintuitive, but the more you give yourself space, the more others will give you space too. They'll start to understand that your time is valuable, and as a result, they'll begin to treat you with more consideration and appreciation. This is how your value increases, by respecting yourself first. But there's another part to this. When you create a little distance, when you make yourself a little less available, you also give others the opportunity to miss you. Think about it. When someone is always there, you stop thinking about them in the same way. They're just there. But when they're not as easily accessible, you start to appreciate them more. You miss their presence. You think about them more. And that's a powerful thing, both in romantic relationships and friendships. When you don't immediately answer every text or drop everything for every request, you give the other person the chance to reflect on your relationship. They begin to see you as someone who's special, someone whose time and energy are valuable. This is how scarcity works in relationships. It's not about playing hard to get or being manipulative. It's about creating a healthy distance that allows the relationship to grow in a meaningful way. When you're constantly available, you risk the relationship becoming one-sided. The other person may start to take you for granted, relying on your constant presence without putting in the same level of effort. But when you set boundaries, you create space for them to step up, to put in the effort, and to show you that they value you. It shifts the dynamic from one where you're always giving to one where both of you are contributing equally. And when that balance is struck, the relationship becomes more fulfilling for both sides. But let's take this beyond just relationships with others. Setting boundaries also elevates your self-worth. When you constantly make yourself available to everyone else, it's easy to lose sight of what you need, what you want, and what you deserve. But when you begin to set clear boundaries, you make room for yourself. You begin to prioritize your needs and desires, and this is how you start to realize your own value. You stop measuring your worth by how much you're willing to sacrifice for others, and you start measuring it by how much you're willing to honor yourself. That shift in mindset is powerful. And here's the thing, when you start valuing yourself more, others start to see that value too. They pick up on the way you carry yourself, the way you stand firm in your boundaries. And that, in turn, makes them respect you even more. People are drawn to those who know their worth, who don't apologize for valuing their time and energy. It's magnetic, and it makes them want to be around you more. When you embrace the power of being less available, you're not only creating a healthier dynamic in your relationships, but you're also teaching others to respect your boundaries. You're showing them that your time is precious, your attention is valuable, and your energy deserves to be protected. And in doing so, you not only increase your own self-respect, but also the respect others have for you. In the end, this is all about understanding that your time is one of your most valuable resources. The more you respect it, the more others will too. The more you honor your boundaries, the more your value increases, and the more you'll attract relationships that are balanced, respectful, and fulfilling. When you're not always available, you become someone others truly appreciate. And that's the ultimate key to building lasting, meaningful connections. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this video. I hope you found it helpful and that you now have a clearer understanding of how to stop being too available and why it truly matters in your relationships. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss any future tips, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or any relationship challenges you're facing. I'd love to hear from you and offer advice. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.